Hey everybody, welcome to today's webinar. I'm joined by Zach Doherty and Hillary Lear from Quiller. We're going to be talking all about AI today. So any questions that you have around the ethics around using AI, what tools might be a good fit for your nonprofit, we're going to cover a lot of that today. So welcome both. Really happy to have you guys here.
Thank you so much, Isa. We're so happy to be here, and thank you to you and the Feather team. It's been really fun working with y'all so far.
Same.
Like what? Thank you so much for having us. And it was a match made in heaven with the identical logos, or very similar logos.
I
So
know, I know. When we saw it, it was like, this is just meant to be. Gotta love the feathers. Cool. Well, if you all want to start dropping in either where you're joining from or an AI tool that you've used for your nonprofit, just kind of want to get a read of the room and a sense of who on here is already using AI. If you have qualms about it and you're here to kind of figure out some answers to your questions, we want to make sure we cover everything today. So, yep, ChatGPT. Springfield, Missouri. That's where my dad is from. Welcome. I haven't used Gemini myself. I know some people love it, but ChatGPT has been my main go-to personally so far. Okay. Love Canva too. I haven't heard of Perplexity. Have you guys?
Oh, yeah, I do love Perplexity. It's great for research because it'll do those typical kind of generated answers that you expect in ChatGPT, but it will provide sources.
Great. Yeah,
It's really
ChatGPT
nice
does
for
not
research.
do a great job of that part.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we got some DC people, Texas. Love it. Okay. Well, thanks everyone. Keep dropping answers in the chat as you join, but welcome to anyone who's just joined. I am here today with Hillary Lear and Zach Doherty from Quiller. So I will pass it off to you guys to kind of intro yourselves, intro Quiller, and dive into the content.
Thanks so much, Isa, and thank you so much to you and the Feather team for hosting us. We're really thrilled to be here and building out this partnership and this collaboration, and with everyone on the call, building our literacy and comfort with using artificial intelligence in our everyday workflows. Heaven knows there's a lot of work that we're all up to these days, so I really appreciate your time joining us. We hope to really offer some insights and actionable information so you leave this webinar with some of your questions answered, some new insights, and some new things you want to try. Just to introduce myself, my name is Hillary Lear. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Quiller. I've been in the nonprofit and political tech space for about 15 years now. I started out as a grassroots organizer at Rainforest Action Network doing environmental organizing. So happy Earth Day to everybody. I know it was yesterday, but hopefully it should be like an everyday thing for all of us. I'd love to hear what other issues everyone works on, either what nonprofits you're at or what issue areas you're active on. So we can use some examples that really speak to what you work on every day. Um, I am located in California, and after Rainforest Action Network and really starting to figure out how to use digital tools in the late 2000s, I went to causes.com and worked on petition platforms, and then I was really early at Hustle when we had just invented a new type of text messaging. So I've learned a lot about how to integrate new digital tools into the life-changing work and world-changing work of nonprofits, and really excited to leverage everything I've learned to help bring AI into our workflows. And there's a lot of unique considerations that come with that, both selecting and utilizing this really powerful new type of technology in a way that matches our values and needs. And so my experience is, of course, going to be from the lens of building out Quiller, which is a generative AI tool tailored to the needs of nonprofits and the types of content that you need to create every day. But through doing that, we've learned about AI broadly. And so we'll use a lot of examples from Quiller today because that's what we live and breathe. But we'll also broaden that pretty significantly so that it's not just Quiller, but all types of AI and some of the broader questions that you need to ask whenever you're selecting any kind of AI tool. And hopefully that can be most helpful. And thank you for all these great responses coming in. And thank you for the work that you do. It's really amazing to see this broad range of work from art to children's welfare to community recovery programs and the Jewish Community Center. Happy Passover. Thank you all so much for everything that you're doing and really excited to meet you today. Zach, do you want to introduce yourself briefly? I think you might be
There
on
we go.
mute.
Trying to come off mute. Yeah, it's so hey, good morning, afternoon, everyone. Zach Doherty, living in the Bay Area, but I saw a lot of you are from the tri-state area, originally New Yorker. To shout out to all my tri-state folks. I joined the Quiller team just this past August, and it's been great. We work in both the nonprofit and the campaign space. So ran full speed into an election year, which was really exciting, and also worked a little bit on the Harris campaign, which was awesome. Prior to Quiller, I was at business school, so it's been really interesting taking those lessons about building this market, which is very new, and learning about it in the nonprofit world and how it can strengthen impact there. And before that, served in the military, and so it's been great transitioning my service from the country to these causes that I care about just as much and want to preserve and fight for. So really excited to talk to you today about ethical considerations for AI. Just got back from the nonprofit tech conference last week. If any of you were there, would love to hear it in the chat. And excited to apply some of those lessons in this webinar. And Hillary, I'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, thanks, Zach. And it's so great working with you on all of these issues. We have a packed agenda for y'all today, so we're going to get through as much as we can. And most importantly, we want to really leave space for Q&A at the end. So we're going to get into as much depth on each of these topics as we possibly can squeeze in. Please keep the questions coming in the chat. Zach will be presenting a lot of this today, and I'll be answering questions in the chat. Let's keep that conversation going so we can really get to the heart of your questions and get you some of that really valuable info at the level of depth that you need to really bring it into your organization. And so we'll go over some of the bias and fairness issues in platform selection and some mitigation techniques, transparency around use of AI, some questions that you may want to ask when you're looking at different tool sets around data privacy and security, the role of AI in addressing or mitigating misinformation, broader impact, how to think about collaboration. So not just selecting the tool sets, but once you really bring them into your teams, how do you prepare to have conversations about the very real questions and concerns that your teammates may have around the use of AI so that everybody feels comfortable and confident using these tool sets? And a lot of times this can come down to pilots, defining success together, identifying what else you want to get to in your workday and how AI can maybe help you make space for that, commitments that you might need from management so people feel comfortable with these productivity enhancing tools, and a commitment to non-replacement, which is definitely really an important part of utilizing these tool sets, equity, fundraising, and tool selection. So we're going to get through a packed agenda and cover as much ground as we can, and please do keep these questions coming. We're happy to continue to answer them. All right, so let's go ahead and dive in. So again, quick piece about Quiller. We've been around for almost 2 years now. We're the first to market Gen AI tool specifically for the use cases of mission-driven organizations like yours. So we went through a process to create a rubric for selecting any LLM that we would work with, which we'll share with you today. Then we trained that on several thousand pieces of hand-tagged fundraising content from nonprofits and campaigns, so that the center of gravity for any content that's created on Quiller is located in the way that and the issues that we're active and the way that we talk about things in these spaces. We since then have supported over 100 nonprofits and campaigns and really try to champion responsible, confident use of AI adoption so that we can get to all the other things that are on our to-do lists every day. And so people will use Quiller for fundraising emails, op-eds, petitions, digital ad copy, blog posts, things like that. But we also have built out our model to have chat functionality. So you can also brainstorm maybe new angles for talking about things with new audiences or different ways of approaching your supporters to get some creativity in that process. And that's us. So quick poll, if you all have your phones, if you wouldn't mind just scanning this QR code. This is just a poll. Would love to get a couple of additional responses in there on where you stand on AI. This will ask you about your comfort levels, some of the tools that you're using. So if you want to kind of you restate some of the ones that you're using that you shared in the chat earlier, just a couple of these answers. I'll leave this up for one more second while people pull up the QR code. Um, Oh, and there was something I forgot to mention about Quiller, so I'll mention that now while people are answering this. So one thing that we really heard from our customers when we were building out this platform was what are some of the most tedious parts of your day, or some of the most time-consuming things? And a lot of it was around recreating talking points, or when you're selecting any type of new software, AI or beyond, is really onboarding onto a new platform. And that can really take a lot of time and be quite tedious. So one thing that we built in our tool set was a faster ingestion model. So you can basically put in the URL of your nonprofit and we'll distill your talking points and positions so that you can kind of hand train your Quiller workspace on your unique voice, tone, and topics, and then produce first drafts of coffee that are much closer to what you would produce just in a fraction of the time. Usually in about, kind of 3 minutes, you can produce a draft of a fundraising email that's pretty close, and then it will go to your teammate to review, finalize, proofread, and approve. So as you're thinking through any AI tools that you want to bring in, you may want to look for some tools that are easy to onboard onto, that use some of the auto magical functionality of AI to lessen the burden on you or your team to get it set up and ready to start producing for you. Okay, so while I was doing that blab, some great responses came in. I'm just going to share some of these responses very quickly. It seems like about 20%, so 1/5 of you feel very familiar with AI. Almost half of you say somewhat familiar, you've loosely considered it, and another fifth or so are not familiar but curious to learn more. Bravo. I think that that is phenomenal and very consistent with what we've been seeing across the board. This is still a very new technology set, and given how powerful it is, approaching this moment with a lot of curiosity is the right way to go. People are largely interested, 78%, in generating content, also automating data analysis and reducing the manual effort involved in content creation, and improving personalization. And I think in a moment like this, when so many of our nonprofit programs and departments need that strength of a relationship with a supporter, with a donor, and look to personalization as a means to achieve that, even when we have limited capacity, that's really a place where AI can be powerful. Also, Zach, I'll flag this to you in terms of the concerns that we'll want to address on this call. The top one was accuracy and factual reliability, and that was tied with losing the human touch. So what's the right way to integrate AI into the work that we do while keeping that human element that is the glue of all of the relationships that we build around shared values and shared missions in our organizations? Other top issues were bias and misinformation and data privacy. So I'm going to wrap this so we can really start to dive in and get into a lot of those details. But before I do, I just wanted to move to the next slide very briefly and name some of the challenges that nonprofits are facing today. And I'm not going to beleaguer these because you live and breathe these challenges. And thank you for hanging in there in the moments that we're facing that are so tough. But for a lot of nonprofits that are federally funded, are facing a lot of abrupt and significant budget shortfalls. There's a bigger need from a lot of impacted communities that are having program shifts and new needs that are being opened for support or advocacy, and a lot of nonprofits are struggling to accommodate that increased demand, while there's also a lot of organizations that are worried about losing their nonprofit status. And so just want to name that we're in a really tough moment here, and proceeding in a way that people feel comfortable, confident, and compliant with is absolutely essential. And in addition to that, we also have the, staffing challenges, digital fatigue, and lower results from traditional approaches to fundraising programs. So we're going to, from this reality that a lot of the partners on the call are facing today, we're going to try to speak from a place of our current need set and how to think about integrating AI to rise to some of these unique challenges that we're facing today. And as we think about that, there's a couple different ways that I'd recommend thinking about how can AI be supportive to my organization in a moment like this. So one is about speed, just needing to do more with less. AI is great for creating drafts of content, kind of helping to get projects unleashed, get things opened up, and thereby increasing the impact of your existing program. So it's not about replacement. It's not about taking humans out of the loop. It's about taking some of the tasks that we do every day that are so arduous or time consuming, alleviating some of that capacity burden so that you can move straight from drafting into copy editing, straight from analysis into finalization, and thereby increasing the scale of your programs. When we look at mission driven work, the ethical applications of our technology is absolutely essential. So we're going to spend a little bit of time talking through some of the components of that. And again, really, if you take one thing from today, just want to emphasize and to have this transparency when you explore this with your teams, we're in a very experimental phase. AI is very new. Its capabilities are still being articulated and defined. And so it's really about a culture of innovation that we're all building together. No one has all of the answers yet. No one has all of the playbooks written yet. But it's an important time to engage because by engaging, we'll define those best practices, we'll define those ethical use cases, and we'll create the playbooks for the right ways to use AI in our spaces together. And it's through our engagement, experimentation, and sharing out of what we learn together as a community that we'll define those moving forward. So, Zach, I'll hand it to you to dive in from there.
Thank you so much. That's great, and I think really sets up the conversation for really, like Hillary mentioned, digging into some of these very specific ethical questions. So, like she mentioned, AI is powerful. It's going to increase efficiency, have all this great impact, but how do you do that in a way that is ethical and as mission-driven organizations, making sure that it is ultimately serving the communities that you're looking to support? So, the angle that I want to start with first is unpacking AI bias. I know I didn't see the survey results myself, but Hillary mentioned that that was one of the top concerns. So, again, one thing I'm really glad, one thing that also got teased out of the survey is a lot of you are using AI, which is phenomenal. So, we can kind of skip the basics of what an LLM is. So as a lot of you know, AI is obviously only as good as the data that it's trained on. So it is going to use historical examples or data that it will learn from and will then use to extrapolate future outputs. And so if there's bias or errors in that data, the subsequent outputs are going to reflect all the errors of those inputs. And so it can amplify any of that bias. The ways that that can present in content generation or with stereotypes. So, for example, if you have coded language, gender coded language around, nurses being coded as typically female or CEOs historically being typically male, that will continue to play out. You'll see exclusion of narratives around, particularly marginalized communities or people who haven't been as represented as often. And then harmful framing. So, for example, savior narratives, if those are historically more common, those continuing to be repeated. And so a lot of the, right now, just focusing on AI bias, but you'll see a lot of these strategies that we're going to talk about will continue to come up. The first and really most basic is starting with an AI policy. It's great. Again, I think it's phenomenal that everyone's already experimenting or has tried out ChatGPT. But whether your organization or enterprise-wide adoption is at the level that it should be, or if it's kind of more shadow use, which is often the case in the nonprofit space, it is a reality. And so making sure that you have a very clear policy for how to do this the right way is key. And so when it comes to bias, that can start with, making sure that you have a human reviewing things and looking at it from a DEI lens, which I know is something that all of you are very versed and trained in. So that's a great starting point. Having a style guide. So again, kind of going back to having a policy for making sure that you're considering it from perspectives that might not otherwise be looked at. Getting feedback from diverse stakeholders, very similarly. And then lastly, I think treating AI as a starting point, not a final draft. So we always advocate a human in the loop approach, where AI is great for getting you from, a blank page and, hey, I want to write up a fundraising email or a blog post, and we'll get you, 80% of the way there. But it cannot and should not replace what you bring as a human. And so making sure that you're reviewing it to mitigate all of this bias, making sure that it has your special touch is key for getting the most out of it. Next, want to look at transparency. So, again, there is a lot of skepticism around AI, whether, both internally for your organizations and then externally. And so a lot of nonprofits might be afraid to touch it for that reason. And I think, it's particularly because you have such close ties to the communities that you work with. I preach to the choir, but a lot of that comes from just trust, building trust, and then being open about your AI use. So in practice, that can, again, making sure that you have a policy for how you're communicating your AI use, which could include things like disclosing content that you've used AI to generate, adding labels such as being AI assisted, human reviewed, making sure that you're inviting that feedback, again, going back to the bias piece from diverse stakeholders, and then actually having internally in your processes, you can document which tools you're using, how you're using them, and then creating a review process to make sure that, again, you're being fully open and transparent with how you're using them. Next, data privacy and security. So I was surprised that this didn't come up as the biggest concern for nonprofits from the just from the nonprofit tech conference at N10 in Baltimore last week. This repeatedly in a lot of these sessions came up as the number one concern.
Yeah, it was still pretty big on that survey. It was just the second biggest.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So you guys are okay. Good sample then. Accurate sample. I think in general, data privacy and security is going to be important for any organization, but especially for nonprofits. You guys are dealing with donor information, at-risk communities, and so it is really imperative to make sure that we're being good stewards of that information. And whenever you're using open source tools like not to name names. If it's ever freemium or you're getting it for free, the saying goes that you are the product. Um, and so making sure that, again, that while AI has advantages, being very cognizant and deliberate about, okay, what are the policies of this company and what is it doing with with my data, asking those questions, et cetera. And I will say too, and I think this is kind of missing in the nonprofit space or in conversations, is that there are AI tools that are catered to this for nonprofits. So making sure that your data is private and secure and that you own it, that it's not being used to train the models. And so there are solutions that you might not be able to get out of mainstream tools just because they weren't built for that use case. And so again, just really being deliberate about like which tools you're using and how you're using the information. So as a general rule of thumb, avoiding putting private information into AI tools. So any PII such as emails, addresses, bank account information, etc. Donor information is going to be key because that is going to be fed to these larger companies, and it's very unclear kind of what they're doing with that data. Um, Making sure that as you choose and select your tools, that you're choosing those that have strong privacy protections. And again, that's a conversation that you should ask and should be looking into companies' policies for. All of them will have some sort of data language and policies for what they're doing with your information. And so you are fully entitled to inquire into that to make sure that you're doing it responsibly. And then the last point I want to touch on is just making sure that you're training staff on this. So again, I think I'm trying to recall from the one of the sessions I sat in on, it was about 58% of nonprofits that don't have AI policies. Their employees are still shadow using AI, which means that again, like AI use is happening, and whether you have a policy or not, or a tool that you've integrated formally or not, like your employees might be using it, and it's not always easy or clear to detect. And so I think it's imperative that, again, we train our staffs on what the right way to do this is. These tools are new, the safeguards aren't fully established. And so just making sure that we're, coming to sessions like this, um, having very frank conversations is going to be essential for making sure that this is done the right way.
That's so great, Zach. And if I could just add one other thing too, if you're starting to get to a place in your utilization where you want to incorporate AI with tools that do contain PII, you can also get a little bit deeper into the use policies of those platforms that you might use or for data and analytics. There's some really neat privacy preserving data analytics strategies that you can utilize. And I'll find an article and kind of share it in the chat. If you do approach the point where you want to take advantage of some of the analytics capabilities with preserving PII, there's a couple of strategies that you can use to do that. And we're still learning about that too, just because we're on the content side, so we don't really engage with PII. But I can share some resources that might be helpful if that's something that you're thinking about. Also, one thing that we did on the Quiller side and that you might see, from a number of AI tools that are tailored to our use case, um, is that we can also work on negotiating so that no data that you create on the platform or that you add to the platform is used to train any models. And this is a nice way to protect your data, to ensure your data ownership, that you own everything that you add or create on a platform. That's our policy at Quiller for all of our clients and users. And so I would look for a similar policy for any tool that you want to use, is making sure that you own your data, both that you add to the platform and that you create on the platform. And having that kind of scan in the policy as you evaluate a tool set is a really good strategy, regardless of the use case.
Thanks. So great additions. Thank you so much. Um, Next, misinformation. So I know this came up as, again, a big concern, and I think is very timely. So a lot of you may have heard or be familiar with the term hallucination. So again, AI is only as good as the data that it's trained on, and as it's making future predictions or making outputs. It's going to refer to that. It doesn't have as smart as it is. It doesn't have the same savviness as a person, and so it can present information very in a way that's very matter of fact, when the reality is it doesn't know, or doesn't is kind of like pulling at straws as to how it's making those connections and extrapolating certain information. Um, and so if you hear the term hallucination, that's what that's referring to. Um, I think the key here is recognizing that what AI is incredibly powerful at and good for is coming up with an overall structure. So, again, if you're looking for not a generic, but, a more general sort of email, or again, as Hillary mentioned, like a brainstorming functionality, it is great for that. Whereas what it hasn't gotten as strong at is the research functionality or citing sources. If any of you, again, it sounded like a lot of you have played with ChatGPT. If you ask it for specific information, particularly things that are more recent, it'll kind of just pull from thin air. And so the first solution, again, just kind of going back to that human in the loop approach, is to always fact check. Um, Again, AI will get you part of the way there, but you should always review before you're putting your stamp of approval on anything. Um, Again, touched on the structural component. Having a content review checklist can be really effective. So, if you have an order that you go about, for your editing process that you typically do maybe with any of your content creators, that can be really effective applying, bringing AI into the fold on that. And so making sure that, you have the first draft generated by AI, you've gone through then and reviewed it, reviewed the facts, you've reviewed it for its structure, its tone, etc. And just having those checkpoints can make it a little easier to formalize. And then again, before you send anything out and giving it your blessing, making sure that there is a final human review again, just to make sure that everything is in line. All right. I want to talk about the impact of AI use. I think this has become really, particularly environmental piece has become really topical. So it is, I want to admit acknowledge the very real concern that AI does have environmental, social, and ethical impacts. But there's often, I think, because it can be so polarizing or it's so new, a lot of these can be skewed, and so I just want to dispel some myths about that. So on the environmental side, and again, this is not to be an AI apologist or like a climate denier or anything like that. It does consume a lot of energy to build AI models, and so that does have a significant carbon footprint. But what is not true is that, doing individual search queries, so, us as general users going into ChatGPT and asking questions, I believe I read from a research article, it was 1,000 prompts to, 1,000 queries is only the equivalent of like CO2 footprint is like boiling a pot of water. So there's actually, and obviously that'll increase for things like image generation. I believe that's 20 times, 10 to 20 times the energy use for what you get out of text. And then for video, depending on the, detail and length, it'll be even more. Again, I think it raises a very legitimate debate about, demand versus, and creating the demand versus use. A couple important things to consider are also these models are becoming more energy efficient. We see that out of like DeepSeek, and I'm not advertising for them at all. There's actually a lot of questions about using things that are sponsored by foreign governments, but there is a use. It is an example of, again, more energy efficient AI use. Um, these models are powerful, and the impact that they can have are the things that they can save you time on, and measuring the impact of, the hours that you would have spent drafting emails, or the time savings, or the reduction in printing materials, etc. Again, I think it's on organizations to weigh what the cost benefit analysis is there. So that is an individual decision. I'm not prescribing what that is. But I do want to acknowledge that it's not as black and white as just AI is destroying the planet. Um, Next, from a social perspective, so at Quiller, we always say that Quiller is your co-pilot. It's not a replacement. And this is again, the models, as smart and powerful as they are, they're not good enough to replace humans, and they will never have the like special sauce that you bring as with your relationships, your expertise. Um, again, because it's drawing on historical data, it is not going to be as adept at like understanding, for example, the current moment that we're in right now, and the tone and what's going to resonate with people. And so, again, that's something that's going to be unique to your organization, to knowing the needs of the communities that you serve. And from a jobs perspective, again, right now, nonprofits, as Hillary kind of outlined in one of those first slides, you have no shortage of things to do. Most nonprofits are under-resourced, understaffed, and so this is really, we don't see AI as a replacement for you. It is going to free up your time so that you can do all the million other things that are actually going to drive impact in your communities. And I'll get into some specific cases of what that's looked like in a couple slides. And then lastly, ethical. Again, I think the key here is just again weighing, how does this fit? How does this align in my organization? And having a very deliberate discussion of, if this matches your values and can augment your work, then it might be a good fit. If not, or you think it's kind of reducing from your ability, that's a totally fair decision. But just being intentional about that before kind of taking, coming up with a policy kind of off cuff. AI and human collaboration. I want to make sure, I want to leave like 20 minutes for Q&A, and I think we've touched on this one a lot. Again, AI is a tool, not a replacement. And again, I think what's really been missing from the conversation around AI, I know I just kind of touched on this, but just to really double down, is reducing redundancy so that you can get back to mission critical tasks. So, a lot of the ROI that we found from AI, from like time savings, for example, will that like that would be the direct corollary to like what the benefit is. What that's not going to show and what you'll experience out of your organization is, hey, the hour that I just got back in my day was an hour that I spent to connecting with donors or organizing an event, or again, just real like being able to do more on in fundraising. And so that's where you're really going to see the value of AI and where um, the collaboration piece becomes key because it's going to just amplify your ability to drive impact where you need it most. And again, I think that's like a second order effect that isn't easy to measure. And so just really want to like double down on that point that again, as you're deciding whether or not AI is the right tool for you, that you're factoring that into like all the things that it's kind of allowed for in kind of second order effects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really well said. And focusing on productivity for mission critical tasks, I think is a great kind of way that you can evaluate, is this tool helping me be more productive, or move more quickly and in a better way on the things that are absolutely essential to my organization, especially in moments like what we're in now. And also just to kind of provide another angle on that, I think a lot of how we primarily think about AI currently is around content generation, through kind of like an LLM based model. And, that's what we've built at Quiller. And I think that a lot of the ways that people are starting to utilize AI is around content generation. But there are also a lot of different types of AI out there, not just for creating text, but images, videos, audio, and also for synthesizing, right? So meeting notes, summarizing documents to make the information easier to digest. There's transcription is huge. Translation is huge. All of these are going to be a faster way to get to that draft that you scan and finalize. But there just can be some real productivity savings beyond the content generation that I just wanted to kind of double click on and emphasize. I also wanted to share my favorite AI tool of the week. I'm not sponsored by this company or anything, but I love how much it's helped me. And so I want to share it with each of you. It's called Whisper Flow. I reviewed their privacy policy and I found it satisfactory for my purposes. It's a voice dictation tool. So anytime you have a text field, you can just press your function button, talk into your microphone, and it'll offer really high quality transcription and dictation of what you said. And just like any other type of AI, I'm going to go through my kind of word vomit dictation and clean it up, right? I'm going to make it more concise and easier. And I might even use an LLM to do that. But instead of sitting down and typing, 2 pages of a blog post, I can actually use it. And maybe this is, if you're getting an executive on board, a fun way to think about how to get your exec to embrace AI as well. Just actually using a really solid voice dictation tool to spitball ideas and then put that into an LLM to clean it up. You can have a blog post done in 20 minutes instead of 2 hours, just through using a combo of these tools. But again, it's always going to be about efficiency and then a human review process. So I just wanted to add another example of that. Thanks, Zach.
No, that's a great example. Thank you so much. Um, all right, steps for accessibility and equity. So, again, for nonprofits, and there's so many different missions that you're supporting, so many different communities, and it really speaks to just the diversity of the work that you do. And so, I think accessibility and equity is key here. Just some quick tips for how to think about that. So making sure that as you're design using and creating AI content, that you're thinking about it again for people of all different abilities and backgrounds. Again, that kind of goes back to the bias mitigation piece that we talked about. Same for cultural sensitivity, plain language and readability. Again, I think it's key to make sure that the content that you're creating, again, really speaks to your communities. I know one. One critique that I heard was from an organization that works with at-risk youth in urban areas, and they found that like the AI language that they were getting was just like not resonant, and so in their use case, it didn't work for them, and I that totally made sense to me. And so again, I think that was like a great example of like taking a critical lens of like, again, what tools are going to work for me, which ones are not, and is this ultimately going to have the impact that I want in driving impact in my community, or are people going to sniff this out and say, oh, this, you clearly didn't write this. And so I think that that's a great example. as a counter to that, AI is great for like translation. So on the flip side is you can also use content and make it like repurpose it in a different language to again make it accessible to audiences that otherwise it wouldn't be available to. So I think that's really powerful as well. Um, and then also adding alt text and image descriptions. And again, just being very conscientious about amplifying equity as opposed to continuing to push underrepresented persons, voices, perspectives down. Fundraising. So this is before we get into like practical tips, and I want to wrap this up in 5 minutes. So we have Q&A. Obviously fundraising is going to drive a lot of your operations. Um, Again, I think here, particularly because the fundraising environment is so hard and the messages can be so touchy. Um, Again, I think this is like what AI will do is again amplify your ability to create content at speed. Another key point here is like because you can use the same key or general prompt and use AI to like write it in a different tone, present it in a different way, so you can have like you could frame the same information differently. And then also A/B test that within your CRMs so that you can see which message is going to resonate better. And I think that's like a really great way to use these sorts of tools at scale to like really find your niche and like be more effective in this space, particularly when it's such a hard environment. And again, just to double tap on the security piece, never like while you're using this to like generate general messages, making sure that you're being good stewards of not inputting private donor data. All right, so now some success stories. So again, there's very legitimate skepticism around AI, but I think that, so much research has shown how much benefit it can have. And hope, again, it sounded like most of you are like fairly on board. So there's been a Google study that's found that AI increases productivity up to 66%, particularly in marketing and content creation. That was a general statistic, but then they further surveyed nonprofits and how they were using AI and found that again, like there was compared to the private sector, the public sector wasn't, or the nonprofit sector hadn't really caught up. And so again, I think that like this just speaks to the opportunity for gains the nonprofits can have. Um, Second study that kind of showcased that was Forums Pro, which found a 52% fundraising boost from nonprofits that were regularly using AI. So I think that was very powerful. And then again, just speaking to what we've seen at Quiller, on average, Quiller saves our users 90 minutes per draft. So, one thing that we found was that again, on like we because we're fairly new, we're still building out case studies with nonprofits. But on the campaign side, what we found was that again that time savings translated to being able to engage with more donors, more voters, do phone banks, do volunteer recruitment, where there were tangible metrics as to how they increased all those. And so again, I think there's just like really exciting, creative ways that people can use AI to just amplify their impact.
Yeah, and that was a big part too of when we created Quiller so that you only had to train your workspace once. And then the second thing that I think also contributes to the cumulative time savings that we designed and you may want to look for in any tool that you use. Is there a way to kind of train it once and have those settings stick? So what we did is we created a style guide maker. So you paste in 5 emails or writing samples that are examples of your stylistic and linguistic preferences. And then we summarize those into a style guide that you can edit and tweak. And then it will apply that style guide to any type of content that you create in the platform. So that was kind of how we approached it in our model so that you don't have, not only do you save the drafting time, but you save the time kind of inputting the stylistic preferences that you want to work from. And I think we saw some nice results out of that. So it was a cool learning for us.
Solid.
Yeah.
All right, last I'm gonna rush through these because I do want to
Yeah.
save time for questions. We're gonna follow up with after the presentation with these exact links. And I think this is like these will be some of the most helpful things that you can find. So first, how to vet AI tools. These are four different frameworks or resources that we found super helpful, offered by Microsoft, N10, Fundraising AI, and Donor Search, that'll give you like a specific framework for, I know in Microsoft's case, it's like looking at how to build AI into your governance structure. For fundraising AI, it's like 10 different it's very similar to some of these topics that we've talked about, but 10 different lenses to view how helpful AI is. For N10, they have like a three part like assessment, impact, and design process for evaluating AI. So I think these are great for giving you a starting place for, okay, I don't know, like I get that I need AI, but I don't know how to bring it into my organization. These will help you build that framework. And then if you trust AI to do this for you, Fast Forward actually offers they use AI to help you build your own AI policy. So you can use these frameworks to kind of come up with like your general priorities and preferences, and then Fast Forward will actually help you build that. And so we'll share the links to all these resources at the end. But again, I think these like if you don't know where to start or you feel like you're kind of just like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks, this is like a really great way to kind of help you be very deliberate up front. And then in terms of finding specific tools, these first four resources are for like general tools. So if you're searching for like a content gen solution, a video solution, a data analysis solution, etc. I'd say more or less all four of these will get you like fairly similar results. But so whichever it's more whichever one is your preference. But these are great places just like find different tools that are out there. And again, I think reconciling those with your mission, your budget, asking these like ethical questions and making sure that they meet your standards, etc. Um, the other one that I'd put in a plug for is so Higher Ground Labs. If you're not familiar with it, it's a tech accelerator for startups building in the progressive space. Predominantly focuses on the campaign and political side, but does also lean into nonprofit work. And what they do a general an annual report on kind of the landscape. And just last year they published their first AI landscape report, which looks at all the different tools in the space that they've kind of vetted and looked at that they've found to align with progressive values. And so it's a really great graphic. It shows like 100 different companies in the space. And if you're kind of just looking for like again, we encourage you to be thoughtful and critical about which tools you're choosing. But if you kind of want like a quick proxy for, okay, these are generally going to be aligned with my values, that's a phenomenal starting point. And I know that their team puts a lot of really hard work into building that and trying to support this community. So couldn't recommend that more. And we'll share the links to all these as well. And so that, let's see. Okay, 4 minutes over, but it still gives us 10 minutes for questions. Thank you so much for your time. Feel free to message us if you want to learn more. And then for those resources, you can just scan the QR code on the right, and we'll follow up with you, sharing those at the end of this. And I will turn it over to the chat for Q&A. Isa, if you want to help moderate, or Hillary.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. This has been really, really helpful and just really tactical. I want to echo what Sarah said in the chat here, that it just feels very grounded. You guys aren't really trying to push anyone one way or another, just sort of providing information, context, clearing up, yeah, just sort of clearing up some of the questions that a lot of people have. So this was really, really great content for me too. And I just wanted to add, one of the ways that I know that our team uses AI sometimes is for short form copy. So I know people talk a lot about blog posts and emails and things like that, which it can be really helpful for, but it's great for iterating on like a subject line or ad copy, things like that. So that sort of short form content that seems like it should be really easy to write because it's short, sometimes requires just, a certain kind of creativity that you might not have at that moment. And so if you just generate some options based on a subject line or an idea that you have, and it spits out 10 different things. It might get your wheels spinning, and you might still come up with your own version of it, but just kind of having a list to go off of, having some options can be a really nice, helpful starting point. So it can be used for so many things. Budgeting too. I know it personally, I've used it for budgeting, putting in, monthly spend and things like that, and kind of seeing what wiggle room I have for things. And so, yeah, if you're looking at budgets for your team or anything like that, it can be great for that type of analysis as well. So, lots of use cases. So I know, Hillary, you've done a great job of answering the questions as we're going. Just want to see if there's anything. Please drop any more questions if you have them in the chat. Um, I would love to hear you guys talk a little bit more about that piece of like, there's tells, right, when someone's using AI. So for people who want to avoid that themselves, but want to lean into using it, what are some easy ways to bring that human element into the review process, but, in a way that is really going to keep the brand and keep the sort of positioning where you want it to be as an organization?
Yeah, what a great question. I think, the first one is to just have that process in place for review. We really recommend a human in the loop and just to make sure that you preserve that special sauce. And as you train your team to review AI generated content, it's good to set an expectation that it's going to feel different than editing human generated copy. And human copy will always have like the people, place, things, right? But the grammar might be off or might like wander a little bit. Sometimes AI can wander. Usually the grammar is perfect, but it might get the people, places, things wrong. So there's a little bit about it that is just a different experience of reading the copy and finalizing it. And so really trusting your instinct as a copy editor and as a reviewer, that if something kind of stands out to you as like needs to be smoothed out, to go ahead and do that smoothing, so that you really retain that you're the arbiter of the vibe. And you're going to scan it for a vibe, not just for accuracy, and grammar. So there's a little bit of the copy editing that you just, it takes a little while to get used to. And the other thing that I recommend there, sometimes what you'll see is as you roll it out to your team, there might be some people who use it and get it and find the value and integrate it into their workday. And there's a couple people that used it once or twice and it wasn't perfect and they kind of abandon it. One thing that we see work really well for teams is if you commit to using it a certain number of days or a certain number of times. Usually, if someone will use AI to generate 5 drafts of a fundraising email, they'll keep using it. But if they use it less, they'll fall off. And I think that's because the value realization and the comfort with editing AI generated copy for the vibe check, and the, kind of style guide, other pieces, the value of that and the ultimate time savings come with the scale and how frequently you use it. So setting those expectations in trial periods is much more likely to increase your chances of success. And so yeah, that human review and having the confidence to say like, I'm going to do the vibe check on this, I think is really important and will help you keep those relationships with your donors and supporters that are always going to be human-led relationships or just assisted in this regard. And to answer Jen's question on acknowledgement of the use of AI in creating emails that go out externally, I really think that this is an organizational choice. What I will say is that I've not seen that be widely adopted to date in a lot of the fundraising use cases that we interact with. And I think primarily that's because it's used so early in the drafting process and there's a final editing and review that's completed by a teammate, that disclosure becomes less relevant. That could be something that needs to be discussed and evaluated if there's ever like an automation or, high level content personalization that's not reviewed. I think people would want to cross that bridge when they get to it. But for now, I haven't really seen a lot of those disclosures and a lot of the transparencies for the internal policies that go out to kind of
And
answer the
I,
question.
I would just add to the second question. You ironically, if you look at Anthropic, they've said if you're applying to a job here, don't use AI to, to like answer our questions. Which is, I won't comment on the hypocrisy there, but I would say just staying abreast. If you're seeing that there's like regulation or for the appeals that you're writing, if there's like certain language that specifies this is or isn't okay, again, that's where like the human review is going to come in. Um, To the first question too, I think it was Issa you had posed it. Just want to touch on, again, the AI is as smart as it is, like it is going to take your prompts very literally, and so be it like have like strong prompt engineering is really key. Um, so a couple ways to like go about I know I saw in the chat too, someone mentioned like I hate how it overuses emojis for everything. Like one thing that we've done with Quiller is again, I think Hillary touched on this was like you can train Quiller on your previous content that you've written so that it actually like learns your voice and style. And again, it's not going to do that entirely perfectly where, it's going to be like, oh, I have this like persona now that is replicating me. But it'll get you 80% of the way there so that you're not like having to go from scratch. And even on a tool like ChatGPT, if you say, hey, write me a fundraising email, it's going to give you that's a generic prompt. So it's going to give you a generic output versus if you say, hey, here's an example of something I've written, or I want a fundraising email that touches on XYZ, has a, friendly and warm tone and, is 3 paragraphs, then it'll give you just that. So it's really key, prompt engineering is its own beast. And I think just, being intentional about that, you'll get better results out of it. But, one thing we've done on the Quiller end to kind of like, um, front that or avoid all that is it like you will just train it so that it learns and understands you, and that will save you a lot of time in the long run.
Yeah, I think that's where the usage thing just kind of kills two birds with one stone because the more you're using it, the more the tool learns your tone and what you want. But then you're also kind of learning how to prompt it, learning what you're looking for, and you might actually learn how to like better position your mission or like tap into some thing about your messaging that you might not have otherwise tapped into when you're just sort of replicating and writing things versus prompting and thinking through like how do I explain what I'm looking for when it comes to our messaging. So, real quick before there's lots of good questions coming in, I just want to launch this poll really quickly, just to get a sense of who would like a personalized walkthrough of any of the tools that we're talking about. So Quiller is one of them. If you're on here, you might know what Feathr is, but we're a digital marketing platform built specifically for nonprofits. So we automate your touch points across digital advertising, email, and social media. So all of the stuff that you might be doing with AI, kind of generating all of this content, you need to put it into your ads, emails, put it out into the world and get in front of the right audiences. So Feathr can help you do that. So the tools work nicely together. So just, yeah, drop an answer in there if you'd like a walkthrough of either one or both. Cool. Okay. Let's get to just a few more of these questions here. Um, so yeah, somebody asked, he has colleagues that overuse AI to write almost everything, email speeches with little to no human review. They don't have a policy for AI use. How can he convince them to use AI more ethically? Or I guess maybe how could he go about sort of creating that process or developing something to have a policy around that?
I can take this one. So here's no, it's 2 slides back. Um, yeah, I think that's a very much a leadership challenge, and it really does start. Hopefully, you're not seeing this the poll thing too. I can't answer it.
No, you're good.
Okay, cool. Um, uh, yeah, I think it just like it has to come from leadership, and even if I think again, there's so much because this is so new, people are just like doing it. It's kind of like we've opened a black box, and people just like um, are scared or just like or jumping right in without being super thoughtful. I would highly, highly recommend like any of these. Um, the first three are frameworks. The fourth is a database of like articles and thought leadership, and I think it offers some frameworks that'll help you write that policy. So like, could not recommend any of these more. And then again, if you want kind of like the fast hack to like actually building a policy, the fast forward will do it for you. Again, there's potential hypocrisy or irony in like using AI to write your AI policy. So I'll defer judgment on that to you. But and again, just if you're reviewing it, I think that can very much be done ethically. But I would encourage putting a bug in leadership's ear And again, the reality is people are going, just as you described, people are going to use AI in ways that may or may not be sanctioned. And short of having something that says you can or cannot do this, that you can then hold people accountable to, it's kind of the wild, wild west. So I think you need to start with creating a policy, and these are great resources for helping you do that.
Great, thanks. Um, okay. I think we've covered all of the questions. Hillary, are you seeing anything that we haven't gotten to in here?
I think we covered most of it. And Isa, I can't thank you enough for hosting us and just to everyone who joined and asked such thoughtful questions. It was really an honor to be here, and thank you so much for including us.
Yeah, thank you both so much. This was great content. Thanks for everyone who attended today. Hope it was helpful. And we'll
Yeah.
see you on the next one. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all. Really appreciate your time.
Bye.
Bye.